Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the military base and watched the sky turn red. The morning had started like any other Tuesday until the radar screens began showing impossible readings. Ships the size of cities appeared from nowhere, floating above every major population center on Earth. Jake had served in the Earth Defense Force for 12 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The first alien ship descended over New York City like a dark cloud. Jake could see it through the base telescopes even though they were hundreds of miles away. The ship was massive, easily 10 times larger than any human aircraft carrier. Its surface was smooth and black, with strange blue lights pulsing along its edges. Within minutes, similar ships appeared over London, Tokyo, Moscow, and every other major city around the world. The aliens did not wait for diplomacy. They did not send messages or demands. They simply began their attack. Beams of bright plasma shot down from their ships, cutting through buildings like hot knives through butter. Jake watched in horror as entire city blocks vanished in seconds. The explosions were silent from this distance, but he could see the mushroom clouds rising into the sky. His hands shook as he gripped the railing. Lisa Carter was underground when the attacks began. She had been working in her laboratory beneath the old NASA facility, trying to solve problems with the new rocket engines. The ground above her shook violently, and dust fell from the ceiling. Emergency alarms started screaming throughout the complex. Lisa ran to the communications room and turned on the emergency broadcasts. What she saw on the screens made her legs weak. Cities were burning. The aliens had superior technology that made human weapons look like toys. Military jets tried to fight back, but the alien ships had shields that deflected every missile and bullet. The plasma beams from the alien ships could destroy entire aircraft squadrons in moments. Within 6 hours, every major military installation on Earth had been reduced to smoking craters. High Commander Vexstar stood in the command center of his flagship and watched the humans flee in terror. His species, the Zephyrians, had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Humans were no different from any other primitive species they had encountered. They had basic technology, simple weapons, and no understanding of real warfare. The conquest of Earth would be complete within days. Vexstar examined the reports from his ground commanders. Human resistance was already crumbling. Their governments were trying to surrender, but the Zephyrians had no interest in negotiating. They needed workers for their mining operations, and Earth had abundant resources. The humans would serve or they would die. It was that simple. The alien ground forces landed in massive transport ships. Thousands of Zephyrian soldiers poured out, wearing advanced armor and carrying plasma rifles. They were taller than humans, with gray skin and large black eyes. Their movements were precise and mechanical. They showed no emotion as they began rounding up survivors. Jake Morrison barely escaped when his base was destroyed. He crawled through the rubble and smoke, his uniform torn and his face covered in ash. Around him, he could hear the screams of civilians and the harsh orders being shouted in the alien language. The Zephyrians were herding people into groups, separating families, and loading them onto transport vehicles. The aliens established control centers in every major city that still had buildings standing. They installed massive transmitters that broadcast their orders in dozens of human languages. The message was simple and terrifying. All humans were now property of the Zephyrian Empire. They would work in assigned locations. They would produce quotas of food, materials, and manufactured goods. Any resistance would result in immediate execution. Lisa Carter watched the broadcasts from her underground shelter. The aliens had rules for everything. No more than 3. Humans could gather together without permission. All human technology was forbidden. Education was banned. Even basic medical care was restricted to keep humans healthy enough to work, but too weak to fight back. The Zephyrians built enormous processing centers, where humans were assigned jobs based on their physical capabilities. Strong men were sent to mining operations. Women with technical skills were forced to operate alien machinery. Children were separated from their parents and sent to training facilities, where they would learn to serve their new masters. Public executions became daily events. The aliens would select random humans and kill them in front of crowds to demonstrate their power. They used their plasma weapons to disintegrate people completely, leaving nothing behind but a small pile of ash. The message was clear to everyone watching. This is what happens to those who disobey. Jake Morrison found other survivors hiding in the ruins of the old world. They whispered stories of the time before the invasion, when humans had been free to make their own choices. Some people had given up hope completely. They worked mechanically during the day and stared at walls during the night, but others still had fire in their eyes. They watched the alien patrols and memorized their patterns. They collected scraps of metal and wondered if weapons could be made. Vextar reviewed the daily reports with satisfaction. Human productivity was increasing as they learned to fear their masters. The mining operations were ahead of schedule. The manufacturing centers were producing materials that would fuel the next phase of Zephyrian expansion. Earth would become another successful conquest in their growing empire, but the High Commander had made one critical error in his assessment. He believed that fear would break the human spirit permanently. He did not understand that humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters by adapting and fighting back. The Zephyrians had given humanity something it had never had before, a common enemy that united every person on the planet. 6 months had passed since the Zephyrians turned Earth into a prison planet. Ryan Phillips crouched in the ruins of what used to be downtown Denver and watched an alien patrol march through the empty streets. The former Marine had learned to move like a ghost through the debris of his former world. His small group of survivors had grown from 5 people to nearly 50, all hiding in the underground tunnels beneath the destroyed city. Ryan had seen enough war to know that every enemy had weaknesses. The Zephyrians were confident in their superiority, which made them careless. Their patrols followed the same routes every day. Their guards fell asleep during the long night shifts. Most importantly, they underestimated human creativity and stubbornness. Amy Rodriguez had been a quantum physicist before the invasion. Now she spent her days in a makeshift laboratory built inside an abandoned subway station. She had been studying pieces of alien technology that Rand's team recovered from crashed patrol ships. The Zephyrian devices were incredibly advanced, but they all operated on the same basic principle. They used quantum frequencies to power their weapons, shields, and communication systems. Amy discovered something that made her hands shake with excitement. All Zephyrian technology operated on a narrow range of frequencies. If those frequencies could be disrupted, their equipment would stop working. She had built a small device from salvaged human electronics that could generate interference patterns. The first test had been successful. When she activated the device near a Zephyrian scanner, the alien machine had simply shut down. Pete Johnson was fixing an old delivery truck in his hidden garage when he heard the news about Amy's discovery. The former mechanic had been modifying human vehicles to run without making noise. His silent cars and trucks allowed resistance fighters to move supplies and people without alerting alien patrols. Pete realized that if Amy's frequency disruptor could be mounted on vehicles, they could disable alien equipment during raids. The resistance was growing larger every day. People who had been broken by months of slavery were starting to remember what freedom felt like. They brought skills that the Zephyrians had tried to suppress. Engineers figured out how to build weapons from scrap metal. Doctors treated wounded fighters with improvised medical supplies. Teachers passed along knowledge that the aliens had. Dr. Helen Brooks had been running a secret medical clinic for resistance members when she decided to try something dangerous. She had been studying alien corpses recovered from skirmishes, trying to understand their biology. The Zephyrians were physically stronger than humans and lived longer, but they had one critical weakness. Their immune systems had never encountered Earth bacteria and viruses. Helen began developing biological weapons using common human diseases that would be harmless to people but deadly to aliens. She knew it was a desperate measure, but desperate times called for extreme solutions. If humans could not match alien technology, perhaps they could use their own biology as a weapon. The Zephyrians were becoming frustrated with the increasing incidence of sabotage and equipment failure. Commander Vextar had expected complete submission by now, but humans kept finding new ways to cause problems. Supply convoys were being attacked by invisible raiders who disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Communication towers were being destroyed faster than they could be repaired. High Commander Vextar decided that humans needed stronger motivation to behave properly. He ordered mass executions in every major population center. Thousands of people were killed in public displays meant to terrorize the survivors into complete obedience. But the executions had the opposite effect. Instead of breaking human spirit, they created more resistance fighters. Jake Morrison had been moving between different resistance cells, trying to coordinate their activities. He carried messages and supplies through dangerous territory, always staying one step ahead of alien patrols. Jake had seen the executions and watched families torn apart by alien brutality. The sight had hardened something inside him that could never be softened again. Lisa Carter had been working with Amy Rodriguez to improve the frequency disruptor technology. Her engineering background helped solve problems that had been stopping Amy's research. Together, they developed a portable device that could disable alien equipment from a distance of 50 meters. The first field test had been spectacular. An entire Zephyrian checkpoint had gone dark for nearly an hour. Ryan Phillips planned the first major coordinated attack using the new technology. His team would hit 3 supply convoys simultaneously while Pete Johnson's modified vehicles provided mobile support. Helen Brooks had prepared biological weapons that would contaminate alien food supplies. Amy's disruptors would prevent the aliens from calling for help. The attack was scheduled for dawn, when Zephyrian guards released alert. Ryan's fighters moved through the ruins like shadows, carrying weapons made from salvaged alien parts and human ingenuity. They had spent weeks studying patrol patterns and memorizing escape routes. Every person knew their job and understood that failure meant death. The first convoy never knew what hit them. Amy's disruptors shut down their shields and communications while human fighters attacked from multiple directions. The aliens were trained for fighting other advanced species with predictable weapons and tactics. They were not prepared for humans, who used improvised explosives, crossbows, and biological warfare. Within minutes, all 3 convoys had been destroyed and their cargo captured. The resistance fighters disappeared back into the ruins before Zephyrian reinforcements could arrive. The aliens found only empty streets and the smoking remains of their vehicles. They also found something else that worried them more than the lost supplies. They found evidence that humans were learning to use alien technology. Vextar studied the reports with growing concern. The humans were adapting faster than any species his people had ever encountered. Most conquered worlds took decades to develop effective resistance movements. Earth had produced organized fighters in just 6 months. The humans were also showing an alarming ability to reverse engineer. Zephyrian technology. Dr. Brooks distributed her biological weapons through the resistance network. Within days, alien outposts across the planet were reporting sick soldiers and contaminated food supplies. The Zephyrians had to start importing all their food from other worlds, which strained their supply lines and reduced their efficiency. Pete Johnson's workshop became a center for vehicle modification and weapon development. His teams could take any piece of human or alien technology and turn it into something useful for the Resistance. They built armored cars from truck parts and alien hull plating. They created mobile workshops that could manufacture ammunition and equipment while staying hidden from patrols. The Resistance was no longer just about survival. It had become about hope. People who had been slaves for months were remembering what it meant to fight for something greater than themselves. They were rediscovering the human capacity for courage, sacrifice, and determination. Amy Rodriguez made another breakthrough when she figured out how to reverse the polarity on Zephyrian power cells. The modified cells could overload alien equipment and cause spectacular explosions. She taught other Resistance cells how to build these improvised bombs. Using salvaged materials, the Zephyrians realized they were facing something they had never encountered before. Humans did not break under pressure the way other species did. Instead, they became more creative, more determined, and more dangerous. Amy Rodriguez held her breath as she watched the Zephyrian patrol ship descend toward the abandoned factory district. Her new frequency disruptor was 3 times more powerful than the earlier versions, but she had never tested it on something as large as a patrol ship. The device hummed quietly in her hands as she waited for the perfect moment to activate it. The patrol ship was sleek and deadly, armed with plasma cannons that could level entire buildings. It moved with the confident grace of a predator that had never known fear. Amy knew that if her plan failed, she and the dozen Resistance fighters hiding in the factory ruins would be dead within seconds. But if it worked, humanity would gain its first major victory against the Zephyrian Empire. She pressed the activation button. The disruptor sent out invisible waves of quantum interference that struck the patrol ship like a hammer. The alien vessel shuddered in midair as its systems began failing one by one. Its engines sputtered and died. Its weapons powered down. Its navigation systems went dark. The ship fell from the sky like a stone and crashed into the empty street with a thunderous impact. Ryan Phillips and his team rushed toward the wreckage before the dust had settled. They moved quickly but carefully, knowing that injured aliens were still dangerous even without their technology. The crash had killed 2 of the 4 crew members instantly. The other 2 were unconscious but alive. Ryan's medic administered drugs that would keep them asleep while the fighters searched the ship. What they found inside the patrol ship changed everything. The Zephyrians kept detailed records of their military operations, troop movements, and supply schedules. The ship's computer banks contained maps showing the locations of every alien installation on Earth. Most importantly, they discovered technical manuals that explained how Zephyrian technology actually worked. Amy studied the alien technical documents with growing excitement. The Zephyrians used a form of quantum engineering that was centuries ahead of human science, but the basic principles were understandable. Their weapons, shields, and communication systems all depended on quantum field generators that could be disrupted or even reversed with the right kind of interference patterns. Tony Edwards had been a fighter pilot before the invasion destroyed the Air Force. He studied the crashed patrol ship with the eye of someone who understood aircraft design. The alien ship was damaged but not completely destroyed. With the right modifications and repairs, it might be possible to make it fly again. More importantly, it might be possible to learn how to build similar ships using human manufacturing techniques. Karen White had been a computer programmer before the Zephyrians banned all human technology. She was fascinated by the alien computer systems recovered from the patrol ship. The Zephyrian data networks were incredibly sophisticated, but they had one major flaw. They were designed to be unhackable by other alien species, not by humans who thought about problems in completely different ways. Karen began working on a way to infiltrate the Zephyrian communication network. If she could break into their systems, the Resistance could intercept military orders and learn about planned operations before they happened. Even better, she might be able to send false orders that would confuse alien commanders and disrupt their coordination. The news of the successful attack spread through the Resistance network like wildfire. Cells across the planet began requesting copies of Amy's improved disruptor design. Pete Johnson's workshops went into overdrive, manufacturing the new devices as quickly as possible. Within weeks, similar attacks were happening on every continent. Commander Vexstar received reports of equipment failures and lost patrol ships from around the globe. The humans had somehow learned to interfere with Zephyrian technology in ways that should have been impossible. His engineering staff assured him that human science was too primitive to pose a real threat, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Dr. Helen Brooks had been analyzing blood samples taken from the captured alien prisoners. She discovered that Zephyrian biology was more vulnerable to Earth diseases than she had originally thought. Their immune systems could not handle even minor bacterial infections that human children recovered from easily. She began developing more targeted biological weapons that would spread through alien populations like wildfire. Jake Morrison used the intelligence from the crashed patrol ship to plan larger operations. The Resistance now knew where the aliens kept their supplies, how many troops were stationed at each base, and when supply convoys would be moving through specific areas. Jake coordinated simultaneous attacks on 12 different targets, stretching Zephyrian defenses to their breaking point. The aliens were forced to change their tactics. They began traveling in larger groups with more escorts. They installed backup systems on all their equipment. They increased security at their bases and started conducting random sweeps of areas where humans might be hiding. But every countermeasure they implemented made them less efficient and more predictable. Tony Edwards succeeded in getting the captured patrol ship flying again. The alien technology was incredibly complex, but human creativity found ways around problems that Zephyrian engineers had never considered. The modified ship could not match the performance of original Zephyrian vessels, but it was fast enough and armed well enough to be useful in combat. Karen White made her first successful penetration of the Zephyrian communication network. She intercepted orders for a major raid on Resistance hideouts in the ruins of Chicago. Jake Morrison was able to evacuate his people hours before the alien attack forces arrived. The Zephyrians found empty buildings and booby traps. Instead of Resistance fighters, Amy Rodriguez developed a new version of her frequency disruptor that could permanently damage Zephyrian equipment instead of just temporarily disabling it. Device sent out cascading waves of quantum interference that overloaded alien power systems and caused them to burn out completely. Weapons hit by the new disruptor became useless chunks of metal. Lisa Carter worked with Tony Edwards to analyze the propulsion system from the captured patrol ship. They discovered that Zephyrian engines used a form of quantum field manipulation that could theoretically be reproduced using modified human technology. If they could build even crude copies of alien engines, the Resistance could have aircraft capable of fighting Zephyrian ships on equal terms. The Resistance was growing stronger and more coordinated every day. What had started as scattered groups of survivors was becoming a real military force. Pete Johnson's workshops were producing weapons and equipment on an industrial scale. Helen Brooks had trained dozens of people to manufacture biological weapons. Using common laboratory equipment, Ryan Phillips established training camps where former soldiers taught civilian volunteers how to fight effectively against superior alien technology. The camps taught guerrilla warfare tactics, weapons handling, and field medicine. Most importantly, they taught people that the Zephyrians could be beaten if humans worked together and used their natural advantages. Vexstar realized that his initial assessment of human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. The species he had dismissed as primitive was proving to be remarkably adaptable and innovative. They were learning from every encounter and becoming more dangerous with each passing day. For the first time since the invasion began, the High Commander considered the possibility that his forces might not be able to hold Earth indefinitely. The first major test came when the Resistance attempted to defend a settlement of human survivors against a full-scale Zephyrian assault. The aliens brought overwhelming firepower and expected easy victory. Instead, they encountered coordinated defenders armed with captured alien weapons and Amy's frequency disruptors. The battle lasted 3 days and ended with the Zephyrian forces retreating after suffering heavy casualties. The successful defense of the settlement proved that humans could fight aliens on equal terms when they had the right weapons and tactics. News of the victory spread through the Resistance network and reached human populations still living under direct alien control. For the first time in months, people began to believe that freedom might be possible. Jake Morrison stood on the roof of a ruined skyscraper and looked out at the network of resistance bases that now dotted the landscape around the former city of Atlanta. What had started as desperate groups of survivors hiding in basements had grown into a coordinated military organization. Smoke signals and radio transmissions connected dozens of camps across 3 states. The resistance was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to take their planet back. The success at defending the settlement had changed everything. Word spread through the underground networks that humans could win against the aliens when they worked together. People who had been living as slaves in Zephyrian work camps began planning escapes. Others who had been hiding in remote areas started making contact with resistance cells. The movement was growing faster than Jake had ever imagined possible. Sam Parker had been an aerospace engineer before the invasion. Now he ran a workshop inside a converted subway tunnel where he built devices that could protect human bases from alien attacks. Sam had reverse-engineered the shield technology from captured Zephyrian equipment and found ways to power it using modified human generators. His shields were not as strong as the original alien versions, but they could stop plasma blasts long enough for defenders to fire back. Amy Rodriguez had moved her laboratory to a secure facility deep underground. Her team now included 12 other scientists who had been working in secret for months. Together, they had developed weapons that could penetrate Zephyrian armor and disable their most advanced equipment. Amy's latest creation was a rifle that fired quantum disruption pulses instead of bullets. The weapon could punch through alien shields and armor like they were made of paper. Dr. Helen Brooks had perfected her biological warfare program. Her diseases now spread through Zephyrian populations with devastating efficiency. Entire alien outposts had been abandoned after becoming contaminated with modified Earth bacteria. The aliens were forced to wear protective gear at all times and import all their food and water from other worlds. The biological attacks were weakening their ability to maintain control over human populations. Ryan Phillips led the assault on the major Zephyrian command center outside the ruins of Miami. His force included 200 fighters armed with captured alien weapons and Amy's new quantum rifles. They moved through the swampland under cover of darkness, using tactics that the aliens had never encountered before. The Zephyrians were trained to fight other high-tech armies, not guerrilla forces that appeared from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. The attack began at dawn when Sam Parker's team disabled the base shields using a massive frequency disruptor. Rayan's fighters poured through the gaps in the alien defenses like water through a broken dam. The Zephyrians tried to mount a coordinated defense, but Karen White had hacked their communication systems and was feeding them false information about human positions and numbers. Tony Edwards piloted the modified patrol ship in support of the ground assault. The alien craft had been extensively rebuilt using human engineering principles and salvaged Zephyrian technology. It was slower and less maneuverable than original alien ships, but its weapons were just as deadly. Tony used the ship to destroy enemy reinforcements before they could reach the battle. The command center fell within 6 hours. The Zephyrians fought bravely but were overwhelmed by human tactics they did not understand. The Resistance fighters captured enormous amounts of advanced equipment, computer records that revealed alien plans across the entire planet, and most importantly, 47 alien prisoners who could provide intelligence about Zephyrian weaknesses. Lisa. Carter studied the captured technology with growing excitement. The Zephyrians had been developing new weapons specifically designed to counter human resistance tactics. But the alien research files also contained detailed information about the quantum field generators that powered all their equipment. Lisa realized that humans might be able to build crude but effective copies of Zephyrian technology using Earth materials and manufacturing techniques. Pete Johnson's workshops were operating at full capacity, producing weapons and equipment for resistance cells across the globe. His teams had learned to manufacture Amy's quantum rifles using salvaged alien components and human machine tools. They were also building vehicles that could travel across dangerous terrain while remaining invisible to Zephyrian sensors. The aliens were suffering losses at an alarming rate. Commander Vextar reviewed casualty reports that showed his forces were being reduced by nearly 10% every month. Equipment failures were becoming common as human saboteurs learned to exploit weaknesses in Zephyrian technology. Supply lines were constantly under attack, forcing the aliens to spend more resources on defense than on maintaining control. Karen White had achieved complete penetration of the Zephyrian communication network. She could intercept any message, alter orders before they reached their intended recipients, and even send false commands that appeared to come from legitimate sources. The aliens were beginning to distrust their own communications, which made coordination between different units almost impossible. Mike Torres had been a factory supervisor before the invasion. Now he organized underground manufacturing networks that produced weapons, ammunition, and equipment faster than the aliens could destroy them. His hidden factories operated in abandoned mines, subway tunnels, and natural caves. They used techniques that combined human industrial knowledge with reverse-engineered alien technology. The Zephyrians made a desperate attempt to regain control by launching massive raids against suspected resistance strongholds, but the humans had learned to blend into the landscape like ghosts. When alien forces arrived at target locations, they found only empty buildings and clever traps. The real resistance bases were hidden in places the aliens never thought to look. Dr. Brooks developed a new biological weapon that specifically targeted Zephyrian neural systems. The modified virus caused alien soldiers to become disoriented and unable to operate their equipment effectively. Entire patrols would wander in circles until human fighters found them and captured their weapons and supplies. Jake Morrison realized that the resistance had reached a critical turning point. They were no longer just surviving or fighting defensive battles. They had become strong enough to launch coordinated offensive operations across multiple continents. The time had come to start pushing the aliens off Earth entirely. Amy Rodriguez made another breakthrough when she discovered how to reverse the quantum polarity of Zephyrian power sources. The technique could cause alien equipment to explode with tremendous force, turning their own technology into weapons against them. She taught the method to resistance fighters who could now turn captured alien devices into improvised bombs. Tony Edwards established a training program for human pilots who wanted to fly captured alien aircraft. The program was dangerous because Zephyrian ships were designed for alien physiology and psychology, but human creativity found ways to modify the controls and flight systems to work with human capabilities. Within months, the Resistance had a small but growing air force. The aliens finally acknowledged that they were facing a species unlike any they had encountered before. Humans did not surrender when overwhelmed by superior technology. Instead, they learned from every defeat and came back stronger. They turned disadvantages into advantages and found ways to use alien strengths against them. Vextar sent an urgent message to the Zephyrian homeworld requesting immediate reinforcements. He admitted that his initial assessment of human capabilities had been completely wrong. Earth was not a conquered world. It was a war zone where the outcome was no longer certain. The humans had demonstrated an alarming capacity for adaptation and innovation that made them far more dangerous than their primitive technology suggested. The message that came back from the Zephyrian High Command was brief and ominous. Reinforcements were being sent, but if Vextar could not maintain control of Earth with additional troops, the planet would be destroyed rather than allowed to fall back into human hands. The Zephyrians had never lost a conquered world before, and they were not prepared to let Earth be the first. Ryan Phillips crouched behind the twisted remains of a highway overpass and watched the massive Zephyrian fortress that dominated the landscape ahead. The alien installation was the size of a small city, protected by energy shields and defended by hundreds of troops. 2 years ago, such a target would have been impossible for humans to attack. Today, Ryan was planning to capture it with a force of 800 resistance fighters. The fortress controlled Zephyrian operations across the entire southeastern region of North America. Its communication towers coordinated alien movements from Florida to Virginia. Its weapons factories produced the plasma rifles and energy shields that made Zephyrian soldiers so dangerous. Most importantly, its detention centers held nearly 5,000 human prisoners who had been scheduled for transport to alien mining colonies on other worlds. Amy Rodriguez had spent weeks analyzing the fortress defenses using intelligence gathered by reconnaissance teams. The alien shields were powerful but operated on predictable frequency patterns. Her newest disruptor design could create cascading failures that would bring down the entire defensive grid. The attack would have to be perfectly timed because the shields would only stay down for 20 minutes before backup systems restored. Jake Morrison coordinated the assault from a mobile command center hidden in the ruins of a shopping mall. He had representatives from resistance cells across 3 continents, participating in the operation through secure communication links. The attack on the fortress was part of a global offensive designed to hit 12 major Zephyrian installations simultaneously. The aliens would not be able to send reinforcements because they would be fighting for survival everywhere at once. Tony Edwards led a squadron of 15 captured and modified alien aircraft toward the fortress from the north. His pilots were all former military personnel who had learned to fly Zephyrian ships through months of dangerous practice sessions. The alien craft were faster and more maneuverable than anything humans had built, but they required constant modifications to work with human physiology and reflexes. Sam Parker had positioned his shield generators around the fortress perimeter. When the attack began, his equipment would create protective barriers that would allow human troops to advance under cover. The shields were not as strong as Zephyrian technology, but they were portable and could be quickly repositioned as the battle-developed. Dr. Helen Brooks had prepared biological weapons specifically designed for this operation. Her latest creation was an airborne virus that would spread through the fortress ventilation systems and incapacitate alien defenders without harming human prisoners. The virus worked by attacking Zephyrian nervous systems and causing temporary paralysis. It was harmless to humans but devastating to aliens. Lisa Carter monitored the fortress power systems from her mobile laboratory. She had learned to identify the quantum signatures of different types of Zephyrian equipment. When Amy's disruptors brought down the main shields, Lisa would target the backup generators to prevent them from restoring defensive systems. Her team would also hack into the fortress computers to locate prisoner holding areas and weapon storage facilities. The attack began at midnight when Ostimus. Amy activated her disruptors from 3 different locations around the fortress. The alien shields flickered and died as cascading quantum failures spread through their power grid. Emergency alarms began screaming throughout the installation as Zephyrian technicians tried desperately to restore their defenses. Ryan's ground forces advanced through the gaps in the shield grid like a carefully orchestrated dance. Each team knew exactly where to go and what objectives to capture. 2 years of fighting had taught human warriors how to move and think like the aliens they were fighting. They anticipated Zephyrian tactics and countered them before the aliens could react. Tony's aircraft struck the fortress communication towers with devastating precision. The aliens lost contact with their regional command structure within minutes of the attack beginning. Karen White had been jamming their backup communication systems, so the fortress defenders could not call for help or coordinate their response effectively. Pete Johnson's modified vehicles poured through the main gates, carrying heavy weapons and equipment. His teams had spent months preparing specialized tools for breaking through Zephyrian security systems and freeing human prisoners. They moved through the fortress corridors with the confidence of people who had done this type of operation many times before. The Zephyrian defenders fought bravely but were overwhelmed by human tactics they still did not fully understand. Their training focused on fighting other alien species with predictable weapons and strategies. Humans used improvised tactics, unconventional weapons, and psychological warfare that confused and demoralized alien soldiers. Mike Torres led the team responsible for capturing the fortress weapons factory. His people had detailed plans showing how to shut down alien manufacturing equipment and transport it to hidden human facilities. The captured technology would be reverse engineered and used to build weapons for the continuing war against the Pivamolzi, would be reverse engineered and used to build weapons for the continuing war against the Zephyrian Empire. Helen Brooks deployed her biological weapons through the fortress air circulation systems. Within an hour, alien soldiers throughout the installation began showing symptoms of neural disruption. They became disoriented and unable to operate their equipment effectively. Many simply collapsed and were captured by advancing human forces. Fortress Command Center fell after 6 hours of fighting. Ryan Phillips personally accepted the surrender of the Zephyrian base commander, a decision that shocked alien observers. Humans were supposed to be primitive savages who showed no mercy to their enemies. Instead, they offered medical treatment to wounded aliens and followed rules of warfare that most galactic species had abandoned. Centuries ago, Jake Morrison received reports of successful attacks from around the globe. The coordinated offensive had exceeded all expectations. 11 of the 12 targeted fortresses had fallen to human forces. The remaining installation was under siege and expected to surrender within hours. For the first time since the invasion began, humans controlled more territory than the aliens. Amy Rodriguez analyzed the captured technology with growing excitement. The Zephyrians had been developing new weapons and defensive systems specifically designed to counter human tactics. But their research files also contained complete technical specifications for their most advanced equipment. Humans would soon be able to build exact copies of alien technology using Earth materials and manufacturing techniques. Commander Vextar studied the disaster reports with growing despair. His forces had lost nearly half their major installations in a single coordinated attack. Human capabilities had grown far beyond anything his intelligence analysts had predicted. The species he had dismissed as primitive was now fighting with technology and tactics that matched or exceeded Zephyrian standards. Karen White had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. She had completely compromised an alien communication network and was now feeding false information directly to enemy commanders. Zephyrian units were receiving conflicting orders that sent them to the wrong locations or told them to attack positions that had already been abandoned by human forces. Tony Edwards established training bases where captured alien pilots taught humans how to operate the most advanced Zephyrian aircraft. The aliens were initially reluctant to cooperate, but they quickly realized that humans treated prisoners better than most galactic species treated their own soldiers. Several alien pilots eventually volunteered to fight alongside human forces against their former comrades. Dr. Brooks had perfected biological weapons that could be tailored to affect specific alien species. Her laboratory was developing targeted viruses that would be harmless to humans and other friendly species but lethal to Zephyrians. The weapons could theoretically be deployed on the alien homeworld if humans ever gained the capability to launch interstellar attacks. Lisa Carter made a breakthrough that changed the strategic balance of the war. She discovered how to reverse engineer Zephyrian quantum field generators using modified human technology. The generators could power shields, weapons, and propulsion systems that were nearly identical to original alien equipment. Humans were no longer dependent on captured technology to fight effectively. The Zephyrians finally understood what they were facing. Humans were not just another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. They were a technological civilization that learned and adapted faster than any species the Galactic Empire had ever encountered. Every weapon used against them became a weapon they could use in return. Every tactic employed by their enemies became a tactic they could improve upon. Vextar received new orders from the Zephyrian homeworld. A massive fleet was being assembled to reinforce his failing occupation forces. The fleet would include planet-killer weapons capable of destroying Earth entirely if it could not be reconquered. The Zephyrian Empire would not allow humans to win their first victory in 1,000 years of conquest. Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the liberated fortress and watched the orbital displays showing the approaching Zephyrian reinforcement fleet. 300 alien warships had emerged from hyperspace and taken positions around Earth. Each ship was larger and more heavily armed than anything humans had seen during the original invasion. The aliens had come to finish what they started, but they were facing a very different Earth than the one they had conquered 2 years ago. Human resistance had evolved into something the Zephyrians never expected. What had started as scattered groups of survivors was now a unified planetary defense force with advanced technology and coordinated strategy. Every major continent had industrial centers producing weapons based on reverse-engineered alien designs. Hidden shipyards had been building spacecraft using modified Zephyrian technology and human engineering innovations. Amy Rodriguez had completed her masterpiece. The planetary defense grid she designed used quantum field generators to create a protective shield around the entire Earth. The shield was not strong enough to stop the alien fleet completely, but it would absorb the initial bombardment and give human forces time to launch their counterattack. More importantly, the shield operated on frequencies that would disrupt Zephyrian targeting systems and make precise bombardment impossible. Tony Edwards commanded a fleet of 200 spacecraft, built in secret facilities around the globe. The ships combined alien technology with human design principles to create vessels that were faster and more maneuverable than original Zephyrian craft. His pilots were volunteers from every nation on Earth, united by their determination to drive the invaders away forever. Lisa Carter had solved the problem of interstellar communication. Her quantum transmitters could send messages instantly across any distance, allowing real-time coordination between Earth-based forces and the spacecraft preparing to engage the alien fleet. She had also cracked the final secrets of Zephyrian computer systems, giving humans the ability to hack directly into enemy ship networks during combat. The battle began when the Zephyrian fleet opened fire with their planet-killer weapons. The massive energy beam struck Amy's planetary shield and created spectacular light shows visible from orbit. The shield held for nearly an hour before beginning to weaken under the sustained bombardment. But that hour gave human forces time to launch their coordinated response. Tony's spacecraft rose from hidden bases around the world like a swarm of angry insects. They moved in formations that the Zephyrians had never encountered before, using tactics developed specifically for fighting larger and more powerful opponents. Human pilots flew with desperate courage, knowing that failure meant the complete destruction of their world. Ryan Phillips led ground-based attacks against the remaining Zephyrian installations on Earth. His forces used the chaos of the space battle to overrun alien positions that had been heavily fortified for months. The aliens found themselves fighting on two fronts simultaneously, which stretched their resources beyond the breaking point. Dr. Helen Brooks deployed her ultimate biological weapon. Airborne viruses were released from facilities around the globe, carried by modified weather balloons into the upper atmosphere, where they would be picked up by the air circulation systems of orbiting alien ships. The viruses were designed to spread rapidly through enclosed spaces and incapacitate Zephyrian crews without damaging their equipment. Pete Johnson's workshops had been mass-producing a secret weapon for months. Thousands of small spacecraft, each barely large enough for a single pilot, were launched from concealed positions on the Earth's surface. The tiny ships were too small for Zephyrian sensors to track effectively, but each one carried a quantum disruptor powerful enough to disable much larger vessels. Sam Parker had positioned his shield generators at strategic locations around the planet. When Zephyrian ships tried to land troops for ground assaults, they encountered defensive barriers that could deflect plasma bombardment and energy weapons. The shields bought time for human defenders to position themselves and coordinate. Their resistance. Karen White achieved the impossible. She successfully hacked into the command systems of the Zephyrian flagship and began feeding false information to the alien fleet commanders. Enemy ships received conflicting orders that sent them to the wrong positions or told them to attack targets that did not exist. The alien formation began falling apart as confused commanders tried to figure out what was happening. High Commander Vextar watched his carefully planned assault dissolve into chaos. The humans had learned to fight with technology and tactics that matched the best the Zephyrian Empire could offer. Worse, they were using psychological warfare and unconventional strategies that no alien species had ever employed before. His ships were being destroyed by enemies they could barely detect. Mike Torres had prepared the most ambitious operation in human history. Using captured alien technology and reverse-engineered manufacturing techniques, his teams had built a massive spacecraft in a hidden facility beneath the ruins of Detroit. The ship was designed for a single purpose: to carry the war directly to the Zephyrian homeworld. Amy Rodriguez made one final modification to her quantum disruptors. The new version could create cascading failures that would spread from ship to ship through the quantum field networks that connected the alien fleet. If she could get close enough to the Zephyrian flagship, she might be able to disable the entire enemy force with a single device. Tony Edwards volunteered to pilot the key left to disable the entire enemy force with a single device. Tony Edwards volunteered to pilot the most dangerous mission of the war. He would take a small team in a modified alien ship and attempt to reach the enemy flagship. Once there, Amy would deploy her ultimate disruptor while Lisa Carter hacked into the ship's computer systems to steal intelligence about Zephyrian military capabilities and future plans. The mission launched under cover of the massive space battle raging around Earth. Tony's ship used stealth technology reverse-engineered from captured Zephyrian equipment to slip through the alien defensive perimeter. The team included the best specialists from every branch of the resistance, each one a volunteer who understood that they might not return from the mission. Dr. Brooks' biological weapons began taking effect on the alien ships. Zephyrian crews started reporting symptoms of neural disruption and respiratory problems. Many ships had to reduce their combat effectiveness as sick crew members were unable to operate their equipment properly. Some vessels withdrew from the battle entirely to avoid complete crew incapacitation. Jake Morrison coordinated the global defense from his command center while monitoring reports from the space battle. Human forces were holding their own against overwhelming odds, but the outcome was still uncertain. Everything depended on Tony's mission to the enemy flagship and Amy's ability to disable the alien fleet with her quantum disruptor. Tony's team reached the Zephyrian flagship and docked with the massive vessel using captured alien codes provided by Karen White. They fought their way through corridors filled with confused and disoriented enemy soldiers who were suffering from Helen Brooks' biological weapons. The humans moved with purpose and determination, knowing that the fate of their species depended on their success. Amy activated her ultimate disruptor in the flagship's quantum field generator chamber. The device sent cascading waves of interference through the ship's power systems and into the quantum networks that connected the entire alien fleet. One by one, Zephyrian vessels began losing power and drifting helplessly in space. Lisa Carter downloaded complete files on Zephyrian military technology, fleet positions, and plans for future conquests. The intelligence would allow humans to prepare for any future alien attacks and possibly take the war to other Zephyrian-controlled worlds. She also discovered the location of the alien homeworld and the political structure of their galactic empire. Commander Vextar found himself trapped on a powerless ship surrounded by similarly disabled vessels. His fleet was defeated not by superior firepower but by human ingenuity and determination. The species he had dismissed as primitive had outfought and outhought the most advanced military force in the known galaxy. The remaining functional Zephyrian ships attempted to retreat, but they were pursued and destroyed by Tony's aircraft and Pete's small attack craft. The alien reinforcement fleet was completely eliminated, with most ships captured intact for study and reverse engineering. The Zephyrians had lost their most powerful military force to a species they had considered barely worth conquering. In his final communication to the Zephyrian homeworld, High Commander Vextar sent a warning that would echo through the alien empire for generations. Humans were not just another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. They were a technological civilization with unlimited potential for adaptation and innovation. Any future attempts to conquer Earth would require resources far beyond what the Zephyrian Empire could afford to commit. The war was over, but Earth was forever changed. Humans now possessed advanced alien technology and the knowledge of how to build spacecraft capable of interstellar travel. The species that had been victims of alien aggression had become a spacefaring civilization, capable of defending itself and projecting power across the galaxy.